How you doing, folks? You're watching Live with Onrie, and I'm your host, Onrie Compen. Today's guest is somebody that I've been after for quite some time now. He has been making more than a splash in the comic book world, from doing six-figure crowdfunding campaigns to self-publishing his own work to writing and drawing everything to getting out on convention floors and making a killing and just in general living the goddamn dream. This guy's been an incredible inspiration to me, and it is such a pleasure to have him on the show today. Everybody, please welcome the Ben Bishop. How you doing, sir?
Good, man. How are you? It's good to see you. We usually run into each other at least a dozen times a year, and we talk for like a split second.
Yes,
you're super salesman, and I'm
and you're busy too.
I gotta get back. Yeah. But it's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do us a favor, because if there is somebody out there who doesn't know who you are, and shame on them, they should. And it'd be great if you could tell us all a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ben Bishop. I'm a comic creator. I live over in Portland, Maine, typically wearing a Maine shirt. I've been making comics since I was 11 years old, been drawing since I was 4. Currently in the middle of 3 books, which is too many, but I couldn't say no to one of them. So added it onto the list and cranking away on that. And yeah, I spend most of my days, I mean, we'll get into it, I'm sure, but here in my new space, I got this big new studio.
That
here.
is so awesome. That is an achievement right there.
Yeah. And then you can't really see, but out those windows, I've got this really nice river. And so been working hard to, make that all worth it. And this, this workspace, conducive to feeling good and getting stuff done, because if you're an artist or a comic book creator of any kind, it's just all hours. And so it's been really good for my psyche and my brain and just general state of mind, especially through all this nonsense this year. So
absolutely. And one of the things I'm very grateful for, as I was saying when we were behind the scenes, is this year has been incredibly difficult, but one of the things I noticed kind of like come around June, when I realized like there's no way we were going back to work at conventions, is that I had this big, huge pile of graphic novels and comics that I had to get through. And on that pile were a number of books that you had not only self-published, but had collaborated with other creators on. But let's start at the beginning. Nathan the Caveman, which was your sort of like your first big project. Yeah. And I read that book from cover to cover, and I just found it to be such an intriguing piece of like literature, because I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like a comic book in the traditional sense of like superheroes and supervillains. This is very much a personal story. And it seems I saw a lot of, I don't know you as well personally, but I saw a lot of you in Nathan. So can you tell me a little bit about like the process of like how you decided like this is what I'm going to do, rather than do something that I love, like, Ninja Turtles or like, whatever it is that you really wanted to do.
Right. Yeah. So this is the book. I'll give some people some visuals. This is the 300-page graphic novel, Nathan the Caveman, that I self-published in 2008. So I started it when I was 18. So I wrote this book when I was 18. So that might answer a lot of the questions you just presented, is like, why not superheroes? When I was 18, so that was like 2004 or so, I was really into, and I think a lot of the world was, black and white comics, especially stuff out of Top Shelf. I loved Craig Thompson's blankets. I think like I've got 3 of them right there. Yeah, I've got 3 different copies there. I don't know if you ever read that, but it's 600 pages, and it's supposed to be a book about nothing. And so he wanted to make a book about, not like Seinfeld book about nothing, but like he wanted to make a book about the first time that he ever like shared a bed with somebody. And so it was about him and this girl. It was very romancy and emo. And then he realized halfway through the book he used to share a bed with his little brother. And so half the book kind of goes back and forth. And so I had this idea for this book, Nathan the Caveman, and my goal was I'm going to make a 600-page book. I'm going to make something super heavy and super powerful, and people are going to love it. And then they're going to ask me to draw Spider-Man or ask me to draw Ninja Turtles or something like that. And it's really two stories as well. It kind of bounces back and forth like you saw between the world's first artist here, the Caveman, and then this guy, Nathan, who's a modern day painter living in Portland, Maine, and showing his work at the Portland Museum of Art. And the way I came up with that story, I actually moved to Maine from New Hampshire in 2004 to go to Maine College of Art because going back a little bit, I tried to get hired by Marvel at 11 years old. I wrote them a letter saying like, hey, I really like your stuff. I actually have that letter too. I brought a lot of visuals.
I have my rejection letter too. Well, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I got that envelope too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Who was the editor who rejected you?
It was Darren Auk, 1997.
Oh, okay. Right on.
So I'll show you what I sent them, and then I'll tell you what they
Yeah,
sent.
please do.
So here's a Spider-Man, of course. Another Spider-Man. This is a original character I created when I was 11 called Sean, the Dragon Slayer. But Sean's playing for both teams because he actually can turn into a dragon as well. So that was pretty cool. And then the other two are just like these big boob babes with cross-eye expressions, and they're not very good. But I was on my way. Look at that one. I still have the same signature. So anyway, I wrote to Marvel. This is the real letter here that I kept, and it says, "Dear Marvel Comics, I was wondering how old you have to be to work at Marvel Comics. I'm 11 years old, and I believe I'm very good at drawing. This is why I'm sending you these pictures that I have drawn. Working for Marvel Comics would be a blast. Please send me information, and also, what do you think of my drawing ability?" So they wrote me back. This is that letter, and he basically said, like, hey, your stuff's really good for your age group. Give us a call when you graduate high school. And he said in very Marvel fashion, keep sharpening your skills. And so I took away from that two big pieces of advice, which was get better and get older. And so I did both of those. I would just draw every single day, almost as if I didn't have a choice. Same as getting older, didn't have a choice. And then it came time to graduate, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do what you actually have to do. I can't just call this guy up. They wrote lots of kids back, encouraging them to keep sharpening their skills. And so I moved to Maine to go to Maine College of Art, and I was able to go for a year. And then the second year I got called down to the office, and they said, hey, Ben, we're really sorry, but you can't go to school here anymore. And I just didn't have enough money to keep going. I think I was only like $2,000 short on my loan between scholarships and things like that. And I just couldn't come up with it. I couldn't get any co-signers. I didn't have credit of my own. And so I was pretty down. They said, like, you can't even go back to classes today because, we'll start charging you by the hour. So I was pretty down, but it's what I wanted to do my entire life. So I kind of came to the realization that if I want to make comics, I should just make comics. And so I literally just took this idea that I had, Nathan the Caveman, kind of off the shelf. I was picking away at it while I was in school, working at coffee shops and lobster shacks and things like that. And then I was like, okay, I got to get serious about this and finish it as fast as I can. So I saved up enough money to just live off of like coffee and toast for the next 3.5 years, and then finished the book, self-published it. But it's a good thing I moved to Maine, first of all, because I love it here. I have no intention of really leaving unless I'm able to come back and forth and back and forth. But also I came up with the idea for the book in art history class at the very Portland Museum of Art. I think that first day of art history class, we were looking at a slide lecture of everything we were going to talk about that year. And the teacher got to cave painting, and she said, cave painting is the first form of art, and we have no idea why they did it. And then she just clicked that thing and moved on. And I was like, that's weird. Like, I've never cared really about cave painting. I think it's cool, but like I never thought about it in depth. And I was like, if it's the first form of art, like, why does it exist? Like, why were certain cave people who couldn't even like talk to each other really with language out there being like locking themselves away and being all artsy fartsy in a cave and drawing pictures and stuff? And so the more and more I thought about it, I realized, well, I've only been in art school for like one day. I'm probably not going to discover the real reason. So let me look internally and look at myself, who decided, this is all I've ever wanted to do since I was 4 years old. And I thought, wow, maybe it's just as simple as that, is like your stubbornness and your drive. And you say like, I have to do this. Otherwise I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing here. And that falls for musicians, poets, writers, people who love video games, people who love sports, those weirdos, and obviously comics and art. And so it's kind of it's a 300-page story about why people make art. And in addition to like, why do we do it? We do it because we have to, but what's the purpose of that art once it exists for everyone else? To learn from the past and to move forward through time and not make the same mistakes. So that's where the caveman aspect comes in, as you see his whole story unfold, and he has kind of a tragic ending, and you hope that if you can recognize those ripples in time, that you can, choose to do something differently and be better. And so it's a really long answer to your question, but it was very like emo time in my life. I was into black and white comics, love stories especially. This is a big love story, a love story that travels through time. And I wanted to do something with like what was super at the core of me, which is like simply the fact that if I'm not drawing, I'm an unhappy person. So that's what that was about.
I wanted to speak to something that you had said. The lesson of what you brought across with this book of learning from the past is a very profound lesson that someone who's 18 years old, coming up with that is actually pretty brilliant, because at that point, there's so many places I want to go, but first I actually wanted to ask you this. When you got that rejection letter as an 11-year-old kid, what was your response? Like, were you like excited? Like, did it excite you or did it discourage you? Like, I remember when I got mine, I didn't care, but like, I just kind of kept going with it. But what was your reaction?
I think that that's a good bet, that I was the same thing. I was like, oh, I can just write them a letter and maybe get hired. And then when it didn't happen, I was like, yeah, that seemed kind of crazy. Or I was doing something else, or like playing outside with my friends or something. Like, I did, ever since that moment though, I had wanted to be like the youngest comic artist to make it, which is like, what is that? And when does that happen? So I don't know. And I definitely wasn't, because there's like crazy prodigy artists out there. But that kept giving me the drive to like crank, and get so much work done as much as I could, because time just felt so fleeting. And like, especially nowadays, I feel it too, but I'm just like slower and old, and there's a million other things to do, that it's tough. But that's like a big driving factor, is like, well, I'm not going to be around forever, and I don't want to die at like page 190 of 200. Like, I want to get it done. Like, I'm afraid every time I get on a plane that like the book isn't finished, and I message, a bunch of people that I know. I'm like, if I die, I need you to get these artists to finish this story, like, and but man, that would be a dope book. Like, if they got the artists that I say they got to get,
but of course, how will you ever know?
Yeah,
you'll just have to take their word for it.
I'll fake my death and then just have someone else do all the work on the book.
But the profound. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were in the middle of the thought.
I was just going to say, as far as like history repeating itself and like, learning from the past, even at 18, I was recognizing that crap. And still today we see it like every single day. And it's just so infuriating. It's like, I thought we already did this. Like, don't you understand? And it's just a matter of people not, telling the next generations, oh, this happened before, this is wrong, like
it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to relaunch Spider-Man again, or
I was thinking more like global and stuff, but Spider-Man for sure. No more origin stories.
Yes, no more origin stories. There you go. Now here's a question that's going to be kind of like out there. So you got this. I'm so envious of your studio. I think that's awesome. So I have a home office, and I share it with my wife, who's now working remotely. So she's doing everything in her power to kick me out of there, because we can't work in the same room together. I need silence, and so does she. So tell me about this life of having a studio where you have everything that matters to you in one place, where you can, be creative. How do your days look? Are you just constantly like hitting the drawing board and just knocking stuff out? Or do you have days where you're like, okay, I need to kind of be creative. I'm going to read some comics, or I'm going to play some video games, not just simply because I want to waste away my life, but because I need to, this is also work,
I should do more of that, honestly, but like the deadlines, they lurch on you. And not just the deadlines, but like just the sheer amount of work ahead of you. You're like, okay, best case scenario, page a day. I'm going to be working on this book for the next 300 days. Like, it's nuts. But yeah, so my day to day, I used to share a studio with some other comic creators who were awesome, and we loved having the space. And it was kind of like, I would recommend it to people, honestly, because it you know, if you're slacking or you are just like watching TV or you're getting a late start to the day, like they'll give you hell for it. And so to avoid that hell, you come in early and you crank and you get the work done. And so that can be a lot of fun. I needed to have a bigger space because I've been doing a lot of shipping these days. And I have this club, the Bishark Kids Club, which we'll probably talk about, but there's a logo
Yes,
for that.
actually, let's talk about it. You know, whenever you're ready.
Yeah,
I
we'll
think
get
it's
into that. Yeah.
so awesome. Yeah, keep going.
But so I've got like over 100 members in the club now. So those 11 or 12 by 18 boxes all need to be like on the floor, and each box has this many prints, and they're all signed, and have this many books, this many stickers. So it's like a big production. And so I just really needed more space. I needed less distractions, and to really just like, I was looking at that workload, and I was like, I got to get, you know, back to where I was when I was on Nathan the Caveman, and I was just like, this is the most important thing ever. Like, it's really easy to find some success or, you know, a big fan base, and then just go, oh well, I'm all set. I could just do this. But I want to keep, you know, making new books, making better books, and getting them out there. And that work won't get done if you just get comfortable, you know. That happened to me with just commissions in between Nathan the Caveman and another book, The Aggregate, which we'll get into too. I was just like doing commission after commission, and I was like, this is a great way to live. Like, I can make money and pay my rent and stuff, but it's not as fulfilling as, you know, like, you know, writing a story, publishing it, having someone be so into it, buy that book, and then come back and tell you what they liked about it, anticipate the next one, stuff like that. So yeah, it's been good to have the own space. I usually come in as early as I can. It used to be like 7. These days I'll get in like 9 maybe. And then I just go as hard as I can. My back is limiting these days. I'm in physical therapy now for my back, which has been a huge help. But really, that's the only time I break. There's a lot of days that are filled with shipping or email or, you know, researching the best place to make custom hats or shirts or whatever you're making. And that can be, you know, pretty time sucking and feel like you're falling behind on work. But like you said, it's all work. It's all part of it.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, the aspect of it too is like, you know, conventions are where I make my income. So
Right.
I'm in this phase right now where I'm basically stuck at home, and all I have to do is create. I mean, I have other things going on too, of course, but
Yeah.
I think with what you're doing, it's you got your own enterprise, and you got the entire you are your R&D department, and you're constantly putting stuff out there, and that gives you an advantage to kind of grow your business in almost any kind of circumstance. And I know one person that we have in common who I think that we look to for inspiration, Brian Polito, and just seeing what he's built with everything surrounding, you know, his brand Coffin Comics and Lady Death and all that stuff. And
yeah, he's killing it.
oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a guy, Jesus, you know. But you know, you've also had a chance to work with a hero of yours, and do stuff that you you have actually achieved what you set out to do. One of the things you set out to do in comics. You know, so working with Kevin, what was you know, how did that come about? How did all this, you know, come together?
Yeah, so I'm doing a book currently with Kevin Eastman and writer David Avalone, who is known for a lot of things, but Betty Page and Elvira through Dynamite. And so I was, you know, I've always been an Eastman fan, an Eastman and Laird fan. Of course, I grew up on Turtles, the toys and the cartoon, and then I found the comics later. And where they inspired me most was honestly self-publishing and doing it yourself and showing like there's no greater self-publishing success than the Turtles. It's like, look at what can happen from some wild idea between 2 guys. Like, it's amazing. And it's not just amazing because it's this giant money machine franchise, but like I always say, like, you see kids like wearing the shirts, and it means the world to them, or like playing with the toys. And every generation has like their own turtles, and parents are always quick to be like, you should check out the turtles. And even though they don't love the ones their kids love as much, like it's just everlasting and amazing. So I'd always been a fan of that. In Maine, I came across, I crossed paths with other comic creators in town who, happened to have worked on the turtles, because the turtles came from Maine. Kevin's actually from the town I have my studio in right now, Westbrook.
Was that a coincidence?
Yeah, really. Like when I was a kid, I didn't realize that Ninja Turtles issue 1 came out at the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Traffic Circle, Howard Johnson's, which was 30 minutes from where I lived. Like they did a convention there with Jetpack Comics, and that was where issue 1 came out. I had no idea. We would drive past it, 13 times a week. I just had no idea. And so when I got here to Maine and, start meeting other people making comics, I come across guys like Steve Levine or Jim Lawson, or I did a signing. Steve Levine was one of the original Mirage guys, and he had a store called Shellback Comics, and he orchestrated this signing at his store. And I got to sign next to Eric Talbot and Peter Laird and Steve Levine. And I was just like, is this really happening? Like, this is crazy. And so like those connections started happening. And then one night at Rhode Island Comic Con, Steve was like, hey, you want to go meet Kevin? And we went to the PF Chang's at the mall and hung out with Kevin and his wife Courtney, and we were all drawing like turtle heads on the receipts for the wait staff and the people at the restaurant. And it was just awesome. And we just had fun. We hung out. I wasn't asking him for work. I wasn't showing him any of my stuff. He had actually already seen my stuff, because apparently at that same show, and there's footage out there, he was on a panel and somebody mentioned all the other turtle artists at the show, and he was like, yeah, Ben Bishop's here. He's like, that guy draws turtles better than me. And I was like, what? Like someone told me about it later. But he also had a copy of my book, The Aggregate. I sent him this creator-owned book, The Aggregate.
This is what I want to talk to you about. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
we will, for sure.
We keep alluding to it, but
yeah, it's coming. The Aggregate's coming. And I wanted to get a quote from him for the back here. So I reached out to a bunch of people, including Peter Laird, who did get me a quote. And Kevin is just Kevin, and he's still, like, now that I know him so well, I know he's just busy as all hell. Like, and so he never got me a quote. He got me one recently that I'll use on book 2. It's something like, if I wasn't already working with Ben, I would exhaust myself trying to, or something. And I was like, oh,
that's awesome. That's
yeah, it was really cool. But so he emailed me one day, maybe like 3 months after we had met in Rhode Island, and I was at actually Heroes Con in Charlotte, and I was just out at the bar. I had a mediocre day, and all of a sudden my phone buzzes, and I pick it up, and we're all drinking, and it's like, hey Ben, Kevin Eastman here. He's like, I just read The Aggregate. It's fucking awesome. He's like, do you want to do a book with me? And I was like, guys, and I showed it to my friends, and they were like, go call him. So I stepped outside for like, I think an hour. I talked to him on the phone or so about this story, Drawing Blood, which is we like to say it's the fictional true story of how the Turtles were created. But instead of Kevin Eastman, it's this guy, Shane Bookman. And instead of creating the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shane and his brother created the radically rearranged Ronin Ragdolls, who are samurai cats named after famous anime directors, Miyazaki, Tezuka, and Otomo. So yeah, the rest is history there. He texts me more than my mom, and it's great. Like, it's a great relationship we have. He's a true friend. Same with David. They brought me on board. They liked what I had done with the Aggregate Kickstarter, and they said, we're looking for publishers for Drawing Blood and stuff. And I think I was one of the big pushers to say, like, F that. Let's self-publish this thing. I said, we should just do it ourselves. And then we can make the exact book we want. We can get it out to the people directly. And, worst case scenario, like a publisher doesn't want it, who cares? Like, it's already out and we're happy doing it. And so that's exactly what we did. And I think we raised like $105,000 or something.
Not even what you think, it's what happened. You guys hit $100,000, which is tremendous. I can't imagine the amount of work that took. And that was also Kevin's first crowdfunding campaign too.
Yeah.
But let's rewind a little bit first. Let's get into The Aggregate, because that's really where if I'm not mistaken, that's where you kind of learned how to hone your Kickstarter skills.
Yeah, it's my very first Kickstarter. So like I was mentioning before, I came off of Nathan the Caveman and I was like, okay, I can't go to school, so I'm going to do this big book. I'm going to get it in front of people. They're going to be like, wow, this is pretty impressive. Do you want to draw Ninja Turtles? Do you want to draw Spider-Man? Whatever. And I was actually thinking they would grab it and publish it as well, now that it was already done. And then that didn't happen. Like it sold a lot, and like people who picked it up loved it, like you did. But then I started doing other books. I ended up doing a book called Lost Trail, which was huge here in Maine. It's still huge here in Maine, and it's based off this famous Maine story, Lost on a Mountain in Maine, which is a true story about this 12-year-old boy who got lost for 9 days on one of our highest mountains, Mount Katahdin. And so now, because of that book, I go to schools and I had more stuff on my table. And I started doing more and more commissions, like I said, and I really got, I got the income that I needed, that I never could have imagined for just living, for drawing. I'm getting to draw characters I like Turtles and Spider-Man and stuff, but just for, people's commissions. And it was great. And I did that for a while, like maybe 2 years. And then it just occurred to me, I was like, well, I'm a writer too. I really have all these stories, and I wrote Nathan the Caveman, and I like self-publishing. And so I really wanted to get back to a story of my own. And so I came up with this idea for this book, The Aggregate, which is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi with giant robots and spider cats. So here's some of those spider cats. And thanks to Kickstarter, I was able to, these are actually all people's real cats. This is Ben Temple Smith's cat right here. And so I said, hey, I want to do this book. It's called The Aggregate. It's post-apocalyptic sci-fi. I said, I'll do it on Kickstarter and just hope, other people want to hear my stories too. Like I have a lot of fans that were into everything I was drawing as far as licensed characters, but I kind of took a shot in the dark that I could, not necessarily convince them, but show them like, hey, you might get a kick out of things that I write as well. And I was really lucky. I hit the goal in the first day. And then it just went up from there with stretch goals. And the really special part about this book is it's the world's first split decision comic, which is a company that I started. It's here on my hat. And basically, I wanted to tell stories that let you decide what happens, like an old Choose Your Own Adventure book, but as a comic, because no one had done that before. Any of the comics that were trying it were really like ham-fisted, and I didn't think that they were done well. They would have things like you follow the panels with color-coded arrows or something. And I didn't like that, because then you knew what the choice already was just by glancing down. You knew, oh, well, I'm not going to take that avenue. You know what I mean? So I wanted to make it very non-obtrusive and really actually still feel like a comic first before it felt like some kind of gimmick. I don't want it to feel like a game or anything like that. So you get to spots like this and you just say, do I want to run or do I want to stay? And then you flip to that page and it changes the whole story. It's that simple. So there's 4 beginnings, 7 endings, 20 choices in between. The most I've ever heard is someone's read it 100 different ways. And so currently I'm deep into drawing book 2. This is the script for the entire thing. As you can see,
that's nuts.
Pretty darn thick. And all these tabs here are the different choices and splits. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's this book, The Aggregate, volume 1, 2, 3, however many I end up doing, is always going to be the book that I draw at the height of whatever I'm able to do that day. Like, so whereas some projects might not pay you enough and you're like, I just got to get this done. And you kind of find a style that is faster or looser. With The Aggregate, it's just no compromises. Like, this will always be the book that not only is like the top level of my skill, no excuses, but also a book where just anything can happen, and I want it to be fun things that happen. Like, I'm not going to write scenes that I don't want to draw. Like, so that's where things like giant robots and spider cats come from. You're like, that'd be really sick to draw. And there's a lot of desert environments, because it's like, I need a break from like New York City and Washington, D.C. and like all these like real places that you have to look up reference and do all this stuff. So it's really just like kind of like a vacation book for me. It's like, it's a lot of work, no doubt, but it's like, this is going to just be fun every single day I'm doing it. So.
It's interesting you're mentioning all this, because, I've been working on my next project too. And, I've always been into the history thing with Yisun Shin and with Marx, my other project. And the thing about history. It's not that you get kind of like an outline for where your story is going to go, right? Because you do research and certain things happen at certain times and you have to follow that timeline. But when you're making stuff up, and especially in today's, market where everything is saturated, like you go to a comic book store and like you name it, there's some concept out there that has been redone 1,000 times and it's being regurgitated every week, every Wednesday.
Yeah.
Not to say that it's all being done poorly, but what I really like that you said is I have my label, and through this label, there are no excuses. When I work for somebody else, I might have a shorter deadline and thus I can't exude all of my creative powers into this one book.
Exactly,
I'm going to find ways to do things differently. But with my special projects, I'm going to focus on that, on giving my all to it. And that's a very powerful thing. I think, that's always been where I've kind of fallen on everything. But doing that, making that commitment, not only means that you are in charge of making the best product, but you're also in charge of selling it, producing it, publishing it, doing everything that's necessary, going out on Kickstarter and doing it. And I've hit you up for Kickstarter advice before because I just see what you do, and it's incredible. And the thing about it is, it's hard to break through certain barriers unless you give your campaigns enough forethought before you hit that launch button.
Yeah.
But what are some of the hurdles that you've encountered with Kickstarter, and how have you managed to kind of like move past them and grow from them? And say you have one successful campaign. I remember the aggregate raised somewhere around $30,000 with the first campaign. Then you came back even stronger with the next one because you did this Drawing Blood campaign, and that one did great. And then with the second aggregate, you did over $50,000, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think the first one, the goal was 10, hit that the first day, and then it was all about the stretch goals. Originally, that book was going to be black and white, and I'm so glad it wasn't. I've got these really beautiful colors by Brittany Peer, and I always say it's like one of the best choices I ever made was to build in that stretch goal to be able to hire somebody like her. And so, that one, it was 10 was the goal. It hit 30 something. And then with the second one, I think my goal was 30 something, and then it hit 60, I think, or just under it. But yeah, so my advice, I tried to do all the research I could before the first one, because the last thing I wanted to do was put this Kickstarter out there and then have it fail. Like, I just thought, it's not the end of the world, but in my mind, I was like, oh, that's going to be really embarrassing. And, I'll have to do it again, and I'll have to do it better, but I'll have to explain to people, what I did wrong before. And I just didn't want to have that. So I did 2 months of research, just best time of day to launch Kickstarter, best time of month, best month, all that stuff. And it all matters, because the time of day matters, because your last day is supposedly supposed to be almost as good as your first day. And so if it's ending at 7 a.m. on the West Coast, you're going to lose all those people. And so every little point has some aspect of it that you really got to think through. So I did a ton of research, and then I spent a whole month just building that page. Mine was very graphic based. I didn't want to have large chunks of text unless they were, in my font and looked like part of the comic. So I wanted you to be able to scroll down like it was this big long comic, and still have it be, understandable. So it took a long time to do that, but I think those are two huge things that you need to do. I would say spend at least 30 days researching, ask Google every single question you can, and, best length for a video. What should I mention in the video? What order do you mention things on your page? Does it go story, goal, yada, 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 stretch goals? All that stuff matters. And then 30 days to build the actual page. And so I did the same. I saved up enough money to, kind of not work for 60 days on anything else. And then when Drawing Blood came around, I told them the same thing. I said, this is going to be all consuming for me if I'm going to be running this page and building the page, and responding to backers' questions and coming up with new stretch goals and stuff. Anybody, I guess the best advice is, if you're going to do a Kickstarter, you need to know, you're going to be working every hour that you're awake. And do not be afraid to post constantly, because Facebook loves to hide stuff. They will bury it, especially if they think you're trying to make money. So you might post 13 times, but it really only was seen by like 4 people. So find new ways to post, new places to post, get your backers that have already jumped on board, or your friends or your family to post, because that goes out to their 10 people, you know, and then so on and so on. So it's a lot of work. And then when it's done, there's, well, when the Kickstarter is done, that's when the real work starts and you have to actually make the thing. And then when that work is done, of course, like you said, is shipping them all out and then getting ready to sell, you know, what you've got left as like your general release. And that can be a lot of shipping. This whole area back here, the other half of this room is all shipping, just because it's like, it's such a big part of it. And the more space you have, you know, to spread out and kind of get an assembly line going, the better. But you can't think that's not going to be a hassle. It's probably a hassle you can handle. I think I could probably do 2,000 packages before I would say, okay, maybe I'll look into a fulfillment company. After 2,000 is kind of where I draw the line, because it'll go by pretty fast if a majority of those are like just the book, you know?
Yeah, of course. But when you have other things, you have so much, you're doing so many different things. Like, you're really a one-stop shop for so many different things. You do commissions. You do, you have your own Bishark Kids Club, which we'll get to. You're very good at predicting the future, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not as good at like talking about stuff in the order I should talk. But
that's okay. That's my fault too, because I'm asking you questions as they come to me.
All related.
Yeah. But what I think is really cool is, you know, you found such a creative way to balance all these different responsibilities. Because, you know, the way I look at you, Ben, you know, I'm a writer, and I'm the guy who goes out and publishes his book and sells it. Right. But, you know, that is pretty much the limit of what I do. I mean, I draw layouts too and stuff like that. But you are capable of doing so many different things within comics, which is just really incredible. And you've grown to a point where it's like you don't need Marvel or DC. You don't.
No, I mean I would literally have to say no right now if they asked me to do Spider-Man, just because I've got all this other great stuff going on and my plate is just way too full. But I couldn't imagine like saying no, it would suck. And I don't want to do it because it's like, oh, now I've made it. I want to do it because that 11-year-old kid was like, I'm gonna draw Spider-Man, and I have all these stupid catchphrases like, just make comics. If you want to make comics, just make comics. But my other one that I say all the time, I should probably put on a shirt, is like, set goals, get goals. And it's like every time, well, not every time, but most of the time, if I like say, okay, well, here's what I'm after, here's what I'm going for, like Ninja Turtles, I said I'm gonna get a cover for Ninja Turtles, and so I just started doing fake covers, selling them as prints at shows, until people were like, oh, is that a real cover? Like, or, oh, you're doing covers for Ninja Turtles now. Like that Ben Templesmith said, hey, oh, you got Ninja Turtle work. That's great. I did one before. Da, da, da. And I was like, no, these are actually all fake. Like, they won't give me one. And he was like, what? That's crazy. And then he went back to his table, emailed Chris Ryle at IDW. And an hour later, I had an email from Chris Ryle that was like, Templesmith tells me you want to do a cover. And that was how I got my first cover. And then after that, it just snowballed. And so it's like putting yourself out there, showing the work, like, if you want to make comics, just make comics. So like you can say, oh, I'm a comic creator, or, oh, I'm a writer, but people go, okay, what have you written? And you go, oh, well, I haven't got it published yet. And it's like, well, then you're not a writer. Like print it, hand it to me, let me read it. Now you've written something. And that's just how I feel about all of that. And with comics in general, you mentioned like that I have to do all that stuff. I can write, draw, self-publish, ship, market, things like that. One of the reasons
and sell, don't undersell
and sell,
don't undercut that.
I'm lucky I have that. My dad is definitely a salesman in his core as well, and also a musician. But I'm lucky I have that, because I see people who have like the greatest work and they don't know how to tell people about it, or they're using like terrible resolution and like their photos that they're posting, or like their Kickstarter just looks like crap, and I'm just like, oh, it's too bad. Like, and they don't know, like, or they just don't have an interest in it. Maybe I think I have a real interest in selling as well, and marketing, and doing it right the first time. But the reason I chose comics, going way back, like people would always be like, you should work for Disney, you should do this, you want to do animation. It's like, I love animation, but comics is like one of the ways that you're able to do everything yourself. So I don't have to wait on anybody in most cases. If I've got a book I want to do, I can write it, I can draw it, I can print it, I can sell it, I can ship it. And with animation, you're on a team of hundreds and hundreds of other people, and movie making, the same thing. And so comics was kind of like, I can tell these stories, I can create my own IPs, I can, do what Kevin and Pete did, and like start this, hopefully these characters that grow into something bigger than I ever could have imagined. And that's really exciting. So
and I that message really resonates with me, because that's exactly what I intend to do with all my properties. And I think that a lot of it, the success, I mean, of course, the way it happened for Kevin and Peter, I watched the Toys That Made Us episode, which apparently you made a cameo in that. There was like the picture of you. I saw a
picture of me at like, I think I was like 7 or something, with a big Ninja Turtle mascot.
That's fucking cool. But
what's amazing is we're like 90% sure that's Steve Levine in that costume.
Oh, really?
He's like, I think that's me. And then I have other pictures of me like in the sleeping bag, and Steve's like, yeah, I drew that. they call me Young Ben. Kevin and Steve both came up with that on their own separately, and then when we were all at a show together in Texas, they were like, wait, you call him that too? And then Jim Lawson has now changed my nickname to Thirsty Ben.
Oh yeah, because you're drinking all the time.
Yeah, I'm a big alcoholic, I guess. Yeah, no.
Well,
but anyway.
What I was going to say though is, it's really amazing what they achieved, and I never really paid attention to the story. And I watched the Toys That Made Us episode like a couple weeks ago. Now, you and I are kind of like trying to do the same thing. Of course, we have our different approaches because we have different skill sets. We're different people, different projects, and all that stuff. But the one thing that I took the most from watching that episode was what you put into it is really what you get out of it. And you can, and the way that episode ended with them, being reunited after all this time and drawing together again. And you guys have the last Ronin coming out, and you've done covers for that, or did you do the interiors as well?
So yeah, that's the third book. So I'm doing Drawing Blood book 2, Aggregate book 2, and then the third one that I just couldn't say no to is Tmnt Last Ronin, which is a story that Kevin and Pete, kind of. I think it was mostly Pete back in the day in '87 when I was 1 year old. They kind of outlined this story of this like future turtle story where there's only one of them left, and I'm not going to tell you who it is. And now they're going to do it. I think it was originally. It
hasn't come out yet, has it?
No, it hasn't come out yet. I've got four covers for issue 1, but I'm also doing all the flashback scenes. So I'll be doing about half of every issue from 2 to 5.
That is incredible. That is absolute. That is history right there, man.
I know. That's why I couldn't say no. And even David, the writer on Drawing Blood, was like, "Well, we'd be really shitty to not let Ben do this." So, so I'm thankful for that, and obviously goes without saying, hopefully, but I'm thankful for all my aggregate backers and all my Drawing Blood backers who are just like, "Gotta do what you gotta do." Not going anywhere. The books are coming out, and just like the aggregate, there's never going to be any compromises in the art. I'm not going to rush it. I could easily rush it and get it out to you on time, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to.
I don't think you need to convince any of us of that. You've delivered on your Kickstarter promises. I actually have the aggregate. Here's what happened. So I got it from Kickstarter, or I think I may have purchased it from you at a convention. And when I got the book, what I ended up doing was I just had this big stack of graphic novels. And I had my neighbor over one night, and we were talking about those Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I was like, hey, my buddy, he did this. So I gave it to him, and he tore through it. And I need to go and knock on his door and get it back to him now. So I can read. Yeah. That's the only book I haven't read so far.
Yeah. So well, if he doesn't give it back, let me know. I've got lots of them.
Oh, of course. I will absolutely let you know, and I'll throw some more money in your direction. No. Going from the kind of projects that you've done now, Nathan the Caveman, Drawing Blood, which kind of fall into a similar category in terms of like these are stories that are like real-ish. They're based on something in reality. Now, I really enjoyed Drawing Blood a lot.
Me too.
And it was you just knew those scenes where he was talking directly to you about his experiences, but you also saw a much deeper story there too. And what was ironic about when I was reading Drawing Blood, and the same thing I would say is true about Nathan the Caveman is I've been studying what's out there, obviously, because I think in order to put out something that is going to be worthwhile, you have to know what people are devouring, what are people reading. And the difference that I noticed in a lot of books right now is that there's so much high concept stuff out there. Like you could throw the top talent at a book and then actually read that book and there's no substance in there. It's just like you can look at the cover and you don't know how it's going to end. This is The Matrix meets Tango and Cash, like throw it off to the side. But when you read something like Nathan the Caveman or Drawing Blood, even though, it's Kevin Eastman's story, there's so much more layered in there. There's love. There's all these things that kind of come into it. And that's what I think makes it different from someone who's, say, trying to just get their comic out into, the move into Hollywood so that they can see it get adapted quickly and they can make a quick buck off of it.
Which everyone's doing now. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your take on it? I mean, obviously you want to see your projects picked up and licensed out and all these things. And I don't think you're sitting around waiting for someone to knock on your door. You're also going out there and pushing too on this front. How has that experience been for you so far?
It's been good. I've pitched the aggregate and split decision TV for years now, since 2016. And even if they didn't with the aggregate, just the idea of, sitting at your TV, everyone's got their remote anyway. Most people are using like game controllers. So there's a lot of buttons. And then Netflix, of course, just did it without me, which was great because they've been doing,
what was it? The Black Mirror one, right?
Bandersnatch.
That was fantastic.
Which it's a risk with any pitch anywhere. They can easily just take some parts of it and just go off. And I'm sure, if any of them were listening or something, they'd say, oh, we were working on that a long time, which is what you always hear when you pitch anyway, as I'm sure you've heard. Oh, we've kind of got something like that. And it's like, that's their silver lining to be like, well, we told him, but anyway, so the pitching has been, it's good to get it out there and let more people know you're doing it. Oftentimes, like Dark Horse, for example, I pitched, we were pitching Drawing Blood to them, and then that led to an aggregate pitch, and aggregate led to Split Decision TV, and then they really liked that. And then now I just have a good relationship with those people, and that might lead to something later that's completely unrelated to all three of those things, which is fine. Drawing Blood is out there being pitched right now by really talented people at big places. I think there's a pitch like today or tomorrow. So that's exciting. I don't go to those or, chime in on the Zoom meetings if that's how we're doing them these days. But I think we got a pretty good shot. The story's dope, and it's Kevin Eastman and David. So it could happen. So fingers crossed, all the good vibes, set goals, get goals. But yeah, it's like, that's all after for me. And even with Drawing Blood, it was originally written as the original writing that I read after that night, talking on the phone with Kevin, was a TV pilot. And then they changed it and rewrote it and restructured it entirely so that it worked as a comic. And that was really awesome, because it wasn't like, let's just make this so that we can get a show, or let's just make this so we can get, Netflix money or something. They were like, let's just make an awesome book. And then if that happens, that's even better, and it'll still be rewritten if it happens, and hopefully by us.
Yeah, by the time they're done with it, it'll be taking place on space.
Yeah, it'll be one of those high concept stories. But yeah, so it's cool. They weren't intended to be, real world stories, because they have a better chance of adaptation or anything like that. Like even in Drawing Blood, it's sprinkled with a lot of stuff that's obviously you don't know what is true, because there's suddenly like Lithuanian gangsters and car chases, and he's haunted by his ragdoll's creations. They're like punching him in the face, and he has these hallucinations, and he's definitely struggling with like substance abuse and things like that. And you can't look at all that and think that it's like a perfect mirror to Kevin, because it's not. Kevin has had a wild ride, and he still continues to. Like he bought the tank from Red Dawn. He bought the Batmobile. He was part owner of Heavy Metal magazine for a long time. I think he still is part owner of some of it. So he's got stories, and those stories should be told. And David's got stories. David's dad wrote Man from Uncle. Like he comes from like like royalty, writer royalty. And so he's got his own stories and his upbringings and his convention stories. And even I've got convention stories, same as you, like get into an elevator with a bunch of weird cosplayers or something. And you're like, that should be in a book. Like, and so we just kind of like share all that stuff. And mostly it's, you know, David and Kevin sharing, but I've had the privilege of working on this book, and I'll continue working on it volume after volume. There hasn't been a single page that I've sent in, a single rough, where they had a problem with any of it. Like sometimes he'll be like, oh, don't forget to put that on the t-shirt or something like that, but they just love it. And that, like, that kind of appreciation and just like Ben's doing his thing the same way we're doing our thing has been really, really cool.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect collaboration when, you know, it's just the little technical things. But, you know, that was one thing I wanted to go back to. So when Turtles really did pick up and turn into this big, huge thing, it was because the right person came along and saw it and knew what to do. And it was a risk the whole way, you know, like with getting that toy deal, which was really what kind of set things off. And I don't think that anything like that can be replicated as easily as it was back then, because now there's just there's so many replicas of the Turtles. And I think there's so many different replicas of everything now that really what it comes down to, I think, is the core material and really making that matter first. So I'm really glad to hear that. That's what you guys are.
That's what I was going to reiterate is they were just trying to make a cool comic, you know. Absolutely. Issue 1 was just for them. Like, it was a joke. And then, you know, it hit, and they had like the perfect title, the perfect characters, the perfect just core family element, and really cool looking art and writing. And you can't set out. I mean, some people do if you already come from money or you have, you know, famous relatives or connections and things, but you can't set out with like, well, I just got to get the IP out there and then we can sell it as a movie and a TV show. And like, because all that is very hollow and shallow, I think. And it gets, not that those people are shallow, but those ideas just they're not, you know, the comic book form, I feel like tell your best comic book. And then someone will read that and go, that was the best friggin' comic book. I want to see that as a movie. Instead of going, that was an okay comic book, but I can picture it as a movie. Like, and then with Mark Freeborn, the guy who, you know, helped take Turtles to those next levels as far as toys and cartoons and stuff. It's like you said, it's a little bit of luck, but kind of the perfect storm too, because it's my understanding that, you know, Kevin and Pete were approached by a few people and they were all, you know, suits and ties and we're going to make you rich, kid, like that kind of thing. And it wasn't until like Mark Freeborn's just like excitement got them to go, this is the right guy for this. And they didn't, I think they had a handshake deal at first. And they were like, if you can make it happen, like you deserve to be a part of it. And like, he went out and he hustled and he brought like that stuffed animal turtle with him to the meetings. And, you know, the same as everything you ever hear about, it got laughed out of a lot of meetings. And then finally somebody said yes. And
where's that guy for us, Ben? We need
people. There are people out there. I've been approached by a few. It's the same thing. It's like, I don't know if this is the guy I want to like give half to.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And you know, I've had experiences like this before. I remember I was at New York Comic Con when I just released Marks, and I didn't have the book in hand. But this guy was basically walking around. I don't know if you've ever encountered people like this, where he comes up to other creators and he's acting like he's a big guy. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to shut everybody down about their work. So like he looked at, you know, the helmets, the Russian helmets, and he was like, "That's those aren't accurate. Those aren't Russian helmets. Those are German helmets." And I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up. I spent
I'm
years
deep into this.
Yes, shut the fuck up. You have no idea what you're talking about. Please keep walking. But you can't say these things, of course. You have to be kind of cordial about it. But
sometimes you can. Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes, you know,
I say it to Joker cosplayers who come up to the table and they're like, "Am I in that book?" And I'm like, "Just don't do the voice. Like, you can be Joker. Just like stop doing the voice. Like, I'm not talking to you anymore."
Well, you know, my favorite one is this: when someone walks up to me and they're like, "Hey, is this book free?" And I say, "It is for $10." You know, like
Yeah.
So that way you get them going. But you know, you're right. It's a trust issue, and it's finding somebody with that right level of excitement. But I also think that at the end of it, it's like we all get into comics and we're thinking we need to aspire to be like the next Stan Lee or the next Kevin Eastman or, you know, the next Bob Kane, which honestly, I'm all for that. I'm for taking credit for other people's work and just riding the waves from that.
Sure.
But you know, I think there's something to be said about where we are right now, because I really like being where we are in the sense that we control everything, in the sense of how much money we want to make, how much work we want to take on. We determine our success and our future. And I think that the place we're in right now, the time we're in right now, allows us to do that more than ever. And seeing you and how you're doing it is a testament to that. It's really kind of like proof that if Ben's doing it, then I can learn from him and do the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just figuring it out too. I'm still inspired by people. I think my most recent kind of like business aspiration is what Mark Millar is doing with Millar World. He said, you know, screw Marvel, screw DC. I've got my own stories. I want to have 100% of it. He hires really talented people to make those books with him. He got a buttload of books done, and then Netflix like got the rights to that chunk. They don't take Millar World. He didn't sell those properties to them. They just have the rights to make them. And then he goes, okay, start again. And he's doing a whole nother slate. So it's like, it's a long game for sure. Like I'm going to have a pile of split decision books. I've got a horror one that's in the works. I got another one that's more of like a drama, episodic kind of Lost meets Walking Dead kind of thing. And then we've got other creators now who have been pitching split decision books and going off, and you know, they're working on those and, you know, reporting back, and I'm going, oh, try this. And so like a lot of stuff in the works, but as I said about 100 times, like comics just take forever and it's a long game. So you get that pile of stuff, and then you hope that you've been a good person for long enough that, you know, your friends are now working at these big companies. Like that's the other thing that, you know, we're starting to see, which is cool, is our peers are getting these positions of power that can be like, oh yeah, you want to do Spider-Man? Let's do it. Like, and that's awesome, because you just got to wait it out. And it's like, you think every day, like hundreds of people quit, you know, or they go, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. And then kind of thins the herd. I don't want anyone to quit, but that happens every day.
It happens every day, and it opens up new opportunities for you.
Stick with it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Stick with it.
It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen this post of like two guys digging, and one guy is like really close to the end and he's turned his back, while the other guy is just constantly going, and he has all this way to go. And you know, it really does come down to it. And I don't think any one journey is the same. We're all on our own separate journeys. So you know, it's really great to be able to sit down here and pick your brain, because it will definitely help me with my journey going forward. And I'm sure
I love hearing about what you've got going on and seeing the hustle and all that. And then I'm like,
there's no hustle right now.
More. Yeah.
There's no hustle right now, I assure you. But Ben, I want to thank you for coming and spending time with me today, and taking time out of your very busy schedule. And I'm very much looking forward to Last Ronin, and as well as all your other split decision books. I'm going to go knock on my neighbor's door right now and grab my copy of the aggregate, and I will read it.
See if he's done with it. Yeah, I guess you can read it 100 different ways, so maybe he's not done yet. But
it's very possible. Very possible.
Should let it to, yeah.
For sure. Well, do us all a favor. Tell us right now, if we wanted to throw money in your direction, tell us where we can go. Tell us how we can support you. Tell us how we can follow you. Take it away.
Sure. Yeah, so the best way to see, you know, my day-to-day and what I'm actually working on is probably Instagram. And on Instagram, I'm just the beginning of my last name, Bishart. And it's the same on Twitter. And in addition to that, I've got a store online, the Bish store, which is at bishart.net, bishart.net. And then the big thing we kept teasing here is the Bishark Kids Club, which is absolutely blown up these days, which I think is amazing. It's a little club I started way back in 2017, and we just broke over 100 members now. And we've got this fantastic group chat and this like companionship amongst like all of them. It's amazing. Somebody was having a rough day today and they just said, hey guys, I could really use some encouragement. And for like the next 2 hours, it was people saying nice things about that person, which I think is really huge right now. But in addition to that kind of, family aspect to it, is every 3 payments every quarter, you get a Bish box like this. And this is just an empty box, but some of the stuff that comes inside, I'll show you. Every single thing that comes inside the boxes is exclusive to the club only. So like when we were 50 members, my print runs were 50. Now that we're over 100, my print runs are 100. And so what I've got here is like an item that was in one of the boxes. It's actually issue 1 of Drawing Blood, but it's on this nice yellow sketch cover. And then on the inside, it's every single rough and every single final, no color. So you can kind of see like this inside process edition. And those are all signed and numbered. The other thing that was in the very first quarterly box, the beginning of this year, is awesome. It's this giant Ninja Turtles Target R 11x17 book. So Target R is the first turtle story I did interiors on, and it happens to also be written by Kevin Eastman. And so I self-published this giant 11x17 artist edition of all the pages of that book. And again, it's, club exclusive, and it's all numbered. And so the boxes are just filled with like this super special stuff. And it's totally fun for me to think of. I've done beer koozies and shirts and just all sorts of stuff. We did a quarantine coloring kit, which was like this sketchbook with colored pencils. And then all the prints that came in that box were colorable. And so I had all the members like coloring with their kids now that they're stuck at home. And it's been really awesome that club has taken off the way that it has. It's, afforded me the ability to have a space like this and to, just work as best I can and as often as I can and take care of my back.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. Do me a favor. If you have a couple minutes, hang out backstage. I'm going to close out. I just want to have a few closing words with you. All right.
All right. Cool.
Thank you. Thank you
again.
so much. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right. Well, what a great episode. I told you guys this one was worth it. Oh, no, I got you there. It's all right. I just got you silent for a minute.
Sorry. I was like, we're still live. Don't say anything weird. Yeah.
Don't fart yet. Wait until I close it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. This was an episode I was really looking forward to having, and I'm glad I got it under the belt now. And I will be back next week with new guests hailing all the way from Korea. So this should be an interesting one. And I will see you guys then. And until that time comes, onward to victory.